Welcome back to the deep dive. You're here because you want that key knowledge um, pulled straight from the source. And today we are really focusing in. It's a deep dive on just one single plant species and how it's used strategically, in landscaping. We're talking about Cyperus papyrus. It's super popular, aquatic. We're digging into a gardener's notes on gardening,
Yeah,
part 712, to see how they figured out how to get the biggest impact aesthetically in a water feature.
that's right. And first things first, we need to clear up something right from the notes themselves.
Mm-hmm.
The name. The gardener occasionally calls it Cypress papyrus, which, happens. But it's actually cypress. It's a sedge, like a giant grass, not a woody cypress tree at all. Big difference.
Okay, yeah, Cyprus. Got it. That's important, especially because the gardener's problem is so, well, immediate, practical. They've just got this one plant, right? And
Yeah.
it's doing great, thriving and blooming, apparently, in just a temporary pot. But they're kind of stuck. They don't know exactly where to put it permanently in their outdoor pond, so it keeps doing well.
Yeah, exactly. We're basically following their journey, trying to fill this gap in their knowledge. Because the author notes, and this is interesting, even though they have this amazing plant, they realized they'd actually never seen it just growing wild on its own. Their idea of its natural habitat. Purely theoretical.
That is fascinating. I mean, it's such an iconic plant. You see it cultivated everywhere. But the gardener couldn't just copy nature. They had to look somewhere else for the instructions, basically.
Right. So they pivoted. They went from thinking about the wild to looking at, well, successful gardening. Human cultivation. If you can't see it in nature, you find someone who's already figured it out, right? The notes are clear. They went to a community garden, one with outdoor ponds, specifically to see how this species was being used in practice.
Okay, so that changes things for our deep dive, doesn't it? We're not really talking botany here. It's more like landscaping engineering. We're trying to answer the gardener's own question. How do the pros use Cypress papyrus so it thrives and looks amazing?
Exactly. And those observations at the community garden, they gave some really specific answers. Environmental needs, technical stuff. It goes way beyond just put it in water.
Okay, so what are those non-negotiables? Like, technically, how deep does the water actually need to be? These things get huge, right? 15 feet sometimes.
Yeah, they can get massive. But the key finding from the notes was shallow. You plant it shallow. The root crown, that crucial bit where the roots meet the stems, it needs to be underwater constantly, sure, but typically only 2 to 6 inches deep.
2 to 6 inches, that seems really specific. Why not just, stick the pot on the bottom of the pond, say in 3 feet of water?
Well, if you go too deep, especially when it's cooler or the plant's just getting established, the crown might not get enough oxygen. And also the water pressure, the hydrostatic pressure, can actually kind of hinder healthy root growth. But go too shallow, like just damp soil, and you risk it drying out in summer, which is basically fatal for this plant. It needs that consistent wetness. So the sweet spot they saw was that shallow edge, the littoral zone or planting shelf that's often built into ponds.
Right, okay, so placement solved. Shallow edges, 2 to 6 inches over the root crown. But thinking about how big and fast this plant grows, doesn't that create a huge management headache if you just put it straight onto that shelf? It must spread like crazy.
Oh, absolutely. It does. And that leads right to the next big observation, kind of the engineering solution, containerization. See, Cypress papyrus spreads with these strong underground stems called rhizomes. If you let it root directly into the pond liner or the soil around it, it'll just take over everything fast. So what the gardener saw everywhere it was successful was containers. Big, heavy, non-porous tubs, plastic, ceramic, whatever, sunk right onto that shallow shelf. It physically contains those rhizomes, makes it manageable. You can control the spread, divide it easily when you need to.
Ah, okay. So the placement is structural, really. It's not just a plant sitting there. It's like a contained biological unit. The pot stops it escaping, keeps the whole pond looking neat. Did the notes say anything about what kind of soil goes in those containers?
They did. And this is another one of those details that makes the difference between success and, well, failure. The notes specifically say, don't use your standard potting mix. The light organic stuff. When that gets submerged, it breaks down really fast, leaches tons of nutrients into the water, and then algae blooms everywhere.
Right, which totally defeats the purpose of having a nice, clear water feature.
Exactly. So the recommendation, based on what they saw being used, was heavy soil, like dense clay or loam. That kind of soil does two things. It anchors the plant, because they get really pollen top heavy, right? Keeps them stable in wind.
Yep.
And crucially, it holds on to nutrients better, so it doesn't cloud up your pond water. Keeps things clear.
Okay, this all connects back to the gardener's original goal, right? Getting that amazing visual effect, the how, the container, the heavy soil, the precise depth. That's just the mechanics to get to the why. So what is the payoff? What's the vibe, the aesthetic you get when you follow all these rules?
Right now, we shift from the engineering to the artistry, I guess. And the impact is huge, transformative. The notes nail it. The right placement creates a beautiful tropical, exotic, and lush feel in the garden.
And that feeling comes from the plant's shape it's formed, doesn't it? What is it about Cypress papyrus specifically that delivers that kind of drama?
Well, mostly it's the height, the verticality,
Hmm.
and the way the foliage looks. A lot of water plants are low, clumpy, but cypress just shoots straight up, 10, 15 feet sometimes. Instantly gives you that architectural height, that vertical line that really defines the space around the water. And then you've got those amazing flower heads at the top, the umbels. They look like, I don't know, fireworks or feather dusters. They catch the light, move in the breeze, adds texture, movement. Plus, they create a bit of dappled shade over the water, which also adds to that whole lush, jungly feel.
Yeah, that vertical element is so important. It breaks up the hard edge of the pond, makes the transition from water to land feel more natural, more established. Even if the pond is brand new, it just grabs your eye immediately, draws you in, transports you, like the gardener wanted, to somewhere exotic.
Hmm.
Okay, this has been a really great synthesis of these notes. We started with just one plant in a pot feeling a bit lost, and now we've walked through the technical steps, the depth, the container, the soil, managing the rhizomes, all to get that big aesthetic payoff.
Yeah, and the key thing for you, the listener, to take away is that the look, that spectacle, it really hinges on getting the technical stuff right. You need that heavy soil contained. You need the crown set just right, 2 to 6 inches underwater, and plant it right on the edge for that architectural contrast. It all works together.
But let's circle back for a second to that first point the gardener made, that initial curiosity. They had to go observe a community garden, a totally human-made landscape, to learn all this stuff.
Yeah.
Because they hadn't seen it growing, successfully isolated in a natural spot they could get to.
Right. And that does raise a bigger question, doesn't it? Especially for those of us focused on getting quick, practical tips. If we're relying so much on these curated, controlled environments, gardens, landscaping projects to figure out how to grow something like Cypress papyrus, what does that suggest about how connected we are, or aren't, to the actual natural places these plants came from originally? What else might we be missing, about its real hardiness maybe, or its role in a whole ecosystem? Things we don't see when we only look at the domesticated version that just gives us that tropical, exotic, and lush look.
That's a really compelling thought. Definitely something to mull over. It invites us to maybe look beyond our own garden ponds. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the art and the definite science of planting Cyperus papyrus.